Hello, the reason users PoohBear here, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be looking at how we can take a basic keyboard and turn it into a MIDI controller. But honestly, everything I'm going to be showing today you can use with a normal MIDI controller. So you can use your buttons and your encoders and your faders on that. I just happen to have this one. I don't have any buttons, so I thought, hey, this would be a brilliant little video to make. And what can we do with it once we've actually got it? Well, let's start some music up with it. I can stop, I can go into record mode if I want to. I can move my markers around so we can jump around with the loop markers. Obviously I can actually play it as a... And I'm playing this brilliant swell in the background. But do you know what? Don't like that. I'm going to change the sound. There we go. So I can actually even change the patches on the fly. I might say, actually, I don't like that at all. A bass sound, and again with that bass sound I might say to it, not really too happy with that bass sound, maybe I want to change it to something different. So there we go, let's try that one. But I think you get the idea that we can pack so much more into a little controller like this and have loads of fun. So I think we should get on with things and see how it's all done. So the plan of action is to take this MIDI keyboard and turn it into a MIDI controller. So, and I'm going to do it from the start, and I am going to be going a little bit quick, but hopefully I will show you all the steps, and I have other videos, so if you do get a little bit lost, you can always sort of reference them. So I'm going to start off by taking some existing codecs files, like this basic codec here, and I'm also going to take a basic remote map. We're going to strip them back down to their bare basics, and then we're going to build them up again. So I'm just going to take that and make a copy of that in my PoohBear directory, and then under maps, other, let's grab this basic one here as well, and I'm going to make a copy of that in my PoohBear directory there. The next thing I'm going to do, you don't have to do this, but the next thing I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to rename it. Now, I've already done a picture for this, and I say in one of my other videos I talked about how to do pictures, because they have to be 96 by 96. I've already built myself a picture, so I'm going to call this PoohBear my LPK25, because that's the model number of the actual keyboard, and the SP stands for special, so I'm going to do something a little bit special with it. And the same with this mapping file here. Now you don't actually have to rename these files. I'm going to, because I like to keep things standard, and it just makes it a lot easier to follow. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to quickly double click on this and bring up an editor. I'm just going to quickly switch back to my other one, and I'm going to bring in this one here into my editor as well. So I've got both of these files in my editor ready to go. I'm going to zoom out and probably get my editor to zoom back in again in a second. So this is the codec file, and I'm going to literally come in here and I'm going to rip everything out and leave some basic information, and we can go right from the start and you can see exactly what we're going to be doing. I'll leave one of these lines in here because we're going to use one of these lines. So you need all this information for it to work. Obviously here's my manufacturer. Can I zoom? Let me zoom in and see if I can use the... So I'm using the font zooming rather than my zooming program. So my manufacturer, I was thinking of calling it an Akai because I'm playing around with an Akai keyboard, but at the same time, this keyboard, whoops, how can I spell my name? It's going to be global. So I'm going to put it under my PoohBear. But the model number, I have already decided I'm going to be calling that my LPK25SP. Just happens to be the same as my file name as well. Now this information here has to be exactly the same in your mapping file. So I might as well come along now and just update this bit at the top here with my mapping file. So I'm going to do exactly the same there. I'm just going to do like that. Bosh. So I know that's the same. So them two are the same. Let's quickly go back here. Okay, that's bare bones. I'm now going to turn this into its bare bones. I'm going to do it slightly different. So I'm going to go to the end of the file to start with. And I'm just going to come back up because I know what this file looks like. And what we're going to play around with big time in this is to do with the reason document. So I'm going to delete out everything from there. And then I'm going to go from here, go Shift Control Home. And I want to just come down a couple of lines to the end of there. One more. That's what I want. Bosh. That's all I need. So we blank that out. We blank the other thing out. Obviously, this is going to be a map version 0 and a 0. Yeah, so that's going to be there. That's cool. Let's come into this one here. Let's put that to a 0 as well. Let's be good. That's making us all good about it. So here we go. Absolutely brand new file. Absolutely nothing in it. Setup info text is very important. It's always worth documenting your stuff. Even if you put something as silly as, I'm going to delete this later, you know, so I'll put that in to remind me. Instead, I'm going to say this is going to be a special setup change keyboard to controller. So, let me put an A in change there, so I missed that out. There we go. And that's what we're going to do. So the first thing we need to do is we need to give ourselves a item. Keyword here is going to be item. Then your next word is ideally you should use the word keyboard. Why should you use the word keyboard? Well, that's because that's the standard that Reason have chosen. When you look at all their mappings, they would use the word keyboard here. The reason I'm just humming and hawing about it is because the input type happens to be keyboard as well. So it looks a bit ugly that when you sort of read these things, you think, oh, it has to be keyboard, but no. I'm going to put Fred, but please, 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 leave it as keyboard when you're doing your mappings. I'm just going to make it equal Fred just to show you how it looks, and then you hopefully you get a bit more understanding rather than it saying keyboard everywhere. It just gets a bit confusing. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to do our mapping of our actual MIDI data which is coming in, and we're going to map our MIDI data to our Fred, which is our stepping stone, and we're going to use Fred then later on in our actual mappings. So here we're going to use the word map. Now I'm going to do this a little bit backwards because I think it's, well, I like to do things a little bit backwards, I suppose. So what I'm going to do first is say, well, what happens when I actually hit a note on my keyboard? So I've got to go and track that, which happens to be 9. So if you actually look in some documentation, you might see it as written down as binary. So that would be 1001. So that's how that'll actually look. The next number is actually going to be your MIDI channel. So I could put there 0 being MIDI channel 1, but I'm going to make this global, and that's where this question mark comes in. So that's looking for any MIDI channel from obviously 0 to 15 or 1 to 16 in the real world, that would be. The next thing we've got to actually grab is what is the note. Well, I'm going to assign the note number to this variable here, which is XX, and then obviously, bam, I've hit it and I've got a velocity. So that's going to be my velocity data. So that's the pattern we're actually looking for. Boom. So there's my map. This is the pattern. And now we've got to put in the name. Well, the name's going to be Fred, because that's what I'm assigning it to. So what's the values going to be? Well, the first value is, in this particular case, because we're talking about the keyboard, it's going to be a 1, because I've hit my note on. Then it's going to be a tab, and it's going to be an X. What note am I hitting? And how hard am I actually hitting it? Now, as I said, I was going to map this slightly backwards, and the reason I'm doing it this way is because there is a particular order of how things should work, and it reads from top down. So if you had a certain pattern match, it would read that line and it won't bother reading the rest of the file. So we write things in a certain way, but I wanted to do it this way because this is the standard way that Reason actually write it when you see it listed. In this particular case, it shouldn't matter at all if it's in a different order. Now, 8 happens to stand for note off, which again would be written down binary as 1000. You see that documented in a number of places. So what are we looking for? We're looking for a note off, so that's the note we're looking off. And to be perfectly honest, the velocity doesn't really matter, but there we go. We're going to assign it to that. It's going to be Fred. It's going to be note off, so we're going to put it as a 0. That's the note, and let's be honest, velocity doesn't really matter. And this should be enough for it to work. Should I actually go ahead and prove that this is going to be enough for it to work before I add one more line in? Yeah, actually, why not? So what I'm going to do is save the document, so quickly save that. And then actually we've got to do something with our mappings before we can actually go any further with this. So in our mappings, we've got to say, well, what are we going to do with that keyboard? At the moment we've captured the keyboard, we've got to actually do something with that keyboard as well. And the command for that is going to be, we're going to map, and if you notice, we've got to say what it is. So we called it Fred. This is usually where you would type in the word keyboard. In fact, let me just hit return a few times so there's a little bit of a gap. Now we've got the next item along. It says key. Key is actually to do with keyboards, and it's only to do with keyboards. So if I was doing knobs or faders or anything, this key would always be nothing. So we always have to sort of move it along. In this case, I'm looking for anything from the keyboard. And what's the remotable item? Well, in this case, it happens to be that horrible word again, keyboard. So it's a special kind of keyword. So we're going from my keyboard and we're pushing it to our keyboard. So yeah, so the keyboard's going to a keyboard to a keyboard. It's keyboard. It makes more sense when you start looking at knobs and you start looking at faders of how it actually hangs together. But that should be it. This should now work. So let's save it. And let's start Reason up. So in Reason, I'm going to go into Preferences. Then obviously we need to go into MIDI. And this is where I'm going to click on Add, Manual. And from here, I'm going to select PoohBear, because that's where I put it, under PoohBear. Excellent. Here it is. There's my little bit of text we wrote in here. Found my icon. So this whole portion of it's working. So this looks really cool. Select my MIDI port. There we go. Click OK. Loaded OK. Brilliant. So let's go and quickly grab an instrument just to prove it once and for all that it's actually working. So I need that one there. Dum, dum, dum. And let me just play some notes here. Hey. There we go. Brilliant. It's all working. There's actually one last bit of thing I'm going to do with the MIDI codecs. There's probably several things I'm going to end up doing with the MIDI codecs. But let's do this one thing now before I forget. What you're going to see, because if you're going through any of the Propellerhead's stuff, Reason Studios, God, I'm saying Propellerhead. You see the name Propellerhead a lot in these documents, so you're going to start saying that again. So the other mapping, sorry, I'm really burbling. Let me just do this. Sometimes it's easy for me just to go ahead and do things. Now, what we're going to do is you may see, oh, that's a 9. So I'm actually looking for another note on. And I'm looking for a note on, but this time I'm going to specify what I'm actually looking for. So I'm actually going to be putting in there 0, 0. So 0, 0 is 0 velocity. So out there are some devices and keyboards that send a note on, which would be a 9 with a velocity, and a note off would be equivalent of sending a note on 0 velocity. It's something to catch you out. I thought it only happened in what's called burst mode when you're dealing with MIDI at an interface level, because you could drop some bits off and it makes it, you can get data through quicker. But apparently, no, this is what happens. As I say, I was doing some MIDI stuff in Voltage Modular when I was programming, and I sort of learned about this sort of thing. And so, note off. So we're now going to say it's 0, 0. So we're going to capture this. We're actually going to turn it as a note off. What we're going to turn off, well, we need to know the note. And for some reason, I'm going to put 64 in there. That is just a midway number between 0 and 127. And that's what Propellerhead Reason Studios have chosen. So again, if you look through all their mapping files, you're going to see this line listed. And that's what it's going to do. And so you know now, that's just equivalent of a note off, which is equivalent with this line down here. It's just that we're capturing it for belt and braces. For this particular keyboard, obviously I could ignore that line altogether because I know this keyboard sends a proper note off message. So I could have said don't worry about it, but if you're going through any of the say Reason Studios mappings, that might have catched you out. So I'm just going to quickly save this. I'm not going to have, I should really restart Reason because this is a codec file, but I'm not going to restart Reason because I know I'm working. I haven't actually made any changes which is going to affect what I'm actually up to. So all the changes I'm going to do are going to happen in here, and that's what's going to happen and affect outside. Now, very quickly, we have a number of scopes, and there's three kind of main scopes, I suppose, to think of. The scope of the device itself. We have what is called this scope of a reason document, and then there's this other scope here of the master keyboard. And the actual order you could say they are read in. It doesn't matter the fact that this one's above the other, but I just want to grab this and put this down here. Let's put a few lines, and let's clean this up here a little bit. So up the top here will be your first scopes, and you'll see hundreds of these scopes, and these would be scopes to do with your devices themselves. So this would actually be like your combinators and whatever else. So that scope comes into effect first, then it'll drop down and drop into your reason documents, and then it'll drop down and drop into the master keyboard section. And what I'm saying by drop down is if I happen to map something up here, which I've mapped here, this one will take precedence and this is ignored. If I have something mapped here, which I've also mapped here, this one will take precedence and this one's ignored. So that's what I mean by the order. So this will filter out as you go down. So if you was to do something and you forgot or you didn't realize that something else had it in scope, it won't have an effect. So just sort of bear that in mind. It's one of them silly little things that when you come across and you've got big mapping files, you start scratching your head going, oh my God, what's going on here? And I'll actually demonstrate it. In fact, let's do something really, really nice, simple and basic to start with. And I won't put anything at the top there. We're going to actually start writing out our first bit of mapping. This is where the fun starts, I think. So what we're going to map out Fred. I think I need to change Fred really. Now this time, we're actually going to use this key. So I'm looking at Fred and I'm going to say, right, when I press C2 on my keyboard, what am I going to do? Well, there's a document which isn't well documented, and I've actually documented it and I've put it into my Dropbox, and you can go and get that, and let me go and grab it. So you're going to find it in the PoohBear stuff, and here it is. I've called it reason document remote map, so I can just double click on it and it looks like a remote mapping. Move it to another view. So there we go. So I've got this document open with this document so I can sort of reference it. So you can see we've got all these commands which I've listed out for you. And I know I've doubled it up because sometimes what we'd do is in the codec file we'd call something record and we'd assign it to record or whatever. But these are all the commands that you can actually use within this reason document. And there's a lot in there. And this has actually changed over time, and I must admit I hadn't looked at it for probably a couple of years, and I noticed there's some new things in there which have made me really, really excited, and I can't wait to start playing with them because I know I've got some real brilliant ideas which I think should work, and I'm fingers crossed that it's going to work. But anyway, let's keep things basic to start with. So let's actually do something useful with this particular document. So I'm going to look at Fred, I'm going to look at my C2, and I'm going to use the word play. So that's obviously going to be play on the transport bar in Reason. And obviously if we got play, I'm going to then map Fred, which happens to be my keyboard, and I'm going to map it to the next key next to it, which I'm going to say is D2. Obviously I could go C#2 if I wanted to, but I'm going to keep these down on the white keys, and then I might do something with the black keys, like I might put on, say, the click on one, and I don't know, the pre on the other, or something like that. So we could have, say, let's turn on click and let's turn on pre or something. So let's put on the word stop here. Bomb, 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 play, stop, and that should be it. So I'm going to save this. I don't even have to restart Reason in this particular case, but what I do have to do is go into preferences, and we just need to uncheck and uncheck this. Bosh, done. Now, theoretically, if I grab my keyboard, oh my God, when you're doing things live, is it going to work? So is this going to work? Hey, and stop. So that's play and that's stop. Brilliant. I think you can see where this video is now going. And it's going to be a matter of that we should really go through and start to build these up. So as you can see, we're starting to add a few items, and this is really how you build it up. You just keep going through, just keep building it up and up and up and up. Now, obviously at the moment, I can save this and this will run, but I'm starting to lose, as you can sort of see. I'm losing a lot of these keys to this, these mappings. But there is a way we can actually set this up so we can have these as doing controls, and then we can switch over and then have this playing as a keyboard. At the moment, we're going to probably, let's have a look and see what we can do. So what we can actually do is I did it in another video where we can set up the special key command, and it's to do with keyboard shortcut variations. It allows us from a normal keyboard, we can, Windows, you hold down your Control, Alt, and then you use your number buttons at the top at the same time. Mac, I think that'd be the equivalent of your Option and Command buttons, and it allows you to switch between your different pages. So let's quickly set that up as well. So up here at the top, I'm going to say define my group and my group name. And it's so important that you get this group name correct. And I think even the capitalization on this does actually matter. I say on a lot of things you can get away with, but other things you can't. So now I'm going to have things like page 1, and I'm going to have something called page 2. Now the funny thing is, I'm only going to set up one page really, because when page 2 is selected, I'm not going to actually say anything's on page 2, so it just drops through, and hence it will pass the data down to the master keyboard, which will then play the instrument. So all these notes have been intercepted now, and these notes are not going to go down and be played on the keyboard. So when I'm actually pressing play and stop, it's not going to also play on the keyboard. It's stopped. It's going to be at the top here. So what we've got to actually do here is, by the way, you're going to see remoteable item. It happens to be the play. Then if you notice here, it says the word scale. Scale is purely to do is if you've got using a delta, which we haven't spoken about. So when we're doing MIDI codecs, we have keyboard is a key one. We have value, which is to do with the knobs and everything. We have a delta, which is to do with endless coders, and there's also a button. Sorry, I am waffling, and I'm talking about in here. So your input type. So we're talking about the input type here. It can be keyboard, value, button, and delta. So you've got your endless decoders. So scale is purely to do with delta button, so you can ignore that. Mode is purely to do with output, which we don't have to worry about again with MIDI codec because there's no output. When we get into Luna files, there is. And now we're going to get onto our grouping, and I'm going to call this page 2. And what I'm going to do is just push all these items onto page 2. Click on save. Restart the mapping, turn it off, turn it on, and we should be ready to go. So where's my keyboard? Here's my keyboard. As you can see, we're playing now at the top. So if I was to hold on this one here, I'm going to hold down my Control, Alt, and press number 2, he says. This works. So I pressed the wrong, I was pressing stop. I should have pressed start to start with. So there's stop, there's start. That's record. We've got ourselves record off. I suppose I had, let's pull this up here, maybe get out of the way. I had moving bars and things. So let me take stop off. Also, I was rewind, I had fast forward, so I put them the wrong way round really. So obviously I should go and change them around. And this is going to move my loop markers by 1 bar at a time. There's also another option, which is quite a good option, where you can set your bars up. So you might set them up to say to 8 or whatever, and then you can set it so when you actually hit this key, it'll move 8 at a time. So you can set yourself like a scene basically, and say, I'm going to be looping around this. And then you can say, well, fine, I'm now going to play the next scene. So you hit your button and it automatically automatically come along to the next 8 bars. So you can have a bit of fun with that. And I suppose the last thing was to do with patches, wasn't it? Does this work? I suppose really, let me go and browse for a patch. So let's go and find ourselves a quick patch then. So let's put that patch in there, say. And I don't know, I've never actually used these keys. Hey, I can now browse my patches from the keyboard. I'm quite impressed with that. What would be interesting to see, if I go here, I suppose it is still, yeah. So even though it didn't look like it had to focus then, I could still come through. Wow, cool. I've never played with that next. I've done the next and previous. I've actually done a video of actually how I took remote control of these and then I used to do a MIDI loopback to come and actually control this. But wow, this is quite a good one, isn't it? That we can actually go through and we can change the patches back and forth. Oh, that's something to actually probably view a lot more closer and see what else we've got in here for actually tracking stuff. Now, there's something what caught my eye which was not ever here before, and here it is. And here it is. This is something which has really caught my eye. And in fact, I could have done with this in the video I did the other day, which is select previous keyboard shortcut variation and select next keyboard shortcut variation. So at the moment, we're going back to our typey keyboard to turn this page on and off. And we can actually allocate. There's nothing stopping us coming along here and actually allocating a note to do this for us. So what have I got free? C#2, I haven't used that yet. I was going to use that for my click, wasn't I? I never used it in the end, but anyway. So over here, I'm going to say select, let me think about this. I'm going to select next. I'm not sure how this is working, so let's have a quick look and see how this works. So if I can get away with saying select next, shortcut variation, we should be laughing, and hopefully next will take me on to page 2, and hopefully when I do next it's going to take me back to page 1. So let's actually have a save and let's see how that works. So once again, restart. Cool, grab the keyboard. So now this hopefully is going to be a note. Yes, we're going to hit this. Hopefully this is now going to be a play. Yes, that's a stop. We're going to hit this and we should be back onto notes again. Oh no. Okay, we got to fix that. So what's happening is the next saying, well, there's nothing next to go to, so it doesn't actually do a wraparound. So are we stuffed? Well, no, we're not. If we're going to, well, we can assign another key to obviously do the previous. But I'm actually going to be clever and say, well, I don't want to assign 2 keys. I only want to assign 1 key. And I'm going to be clever by saying I'm going to assign 1 key. And it only would work if you've got 2 pages. If you've got more than 2 pages, you're going to have to assign 2 keys. So I'm going to change it slightly. What's that? I'm going to say that's next, and I'm going to make this one. In fact, no, I'm going to make the bottom one next, and I'm making. Don't ask me why. This is just the way I like to do things. Previous keyboard and that. So 1, 2, 3, because we're going to be putting our page in. So we want to do a previous. We've got to be on page 2. And if we want to do a next, 1, 2, 3, we've got to be on page 1. So what I'm saying is, if I'm on page 1, I'm going to run this command when I hit C2, which is then going to automatically push me onto page 2. So the next time I hit C2, I'm going to be on page 2, which is going to say, hey, I'm going to move previous, which will put me onto page 1. So the next time, so now this 1 key should now toggle between the 2. So let's do a quick save and test it. Restart. Grab the keyboard now. So hopefully this is going to be playing a normal key. Cool. We're going to hit that. That's going to be play. That's going to be stop. I'm going to hit that key. This now is going to be playing a normal keyboard. Woo! However, what we've actually done is we've sacrificed this key. This key is now no longer ever going to play Europa. And believe it or not, that's probably the least key I play the most on this tiny keyboard. If I was doing things on my big keyboards, then yeah, I do use that key. But on this tiny keyboard, for some reason, I never touch them notes. So I could sacrifice that note and say, hey, let's be done with it. That's not a problem. Now, sorry you can't see because of the way I've got I've done my fading, but I've just realised I've got a sustain button here, and I might be able to use that. So actually, let's actually have a look and see if we can do anything with this sustain button. So I've started up Midi aux, close reason down, started up Midi aux. I've got my Midi port, and that's what I'm monitoring. So all I'm doing is monitoring the MIDI port. So on an Apple, you've probably got something. So if I hit a note, it would tell me I've got my note on, my note off. And the only reason I'm doing this is I'm double checking to make sure that my sustain is actually 40, which is 64. So yeah, I'm checking that, and that's what it is. So that button definitely is a CC 40 hex, which is what I'm after. And 7F would be 127. And when I let go, it goes to 00. That should not be an issue. I should be able to map that button now to switch between a next and a previous variation on my keyboard shortcut, and hence release that note. Let's have a look at that. So this change has to be made into our MIDI codec file. So we're going to actually capture that little bit of MIDI data. So we need to add ourselves a new item up here. So we're going to have item, and it's the sustain. So again, I'm going to be boring and call this a dampener pedal, he says, if I can spell, because that is what, again, Reason Studios uses throughout their kind of stuff. That's what they just say, we're going to use that. It's going to be a value because it's a CC coming in, and it's a value between 0 and 127. Done. Now we need to capture the actual MIDI. So it's going to be map, and it's a B because that's for the CC number. Again, I could put 0 in because it's to do with my little keyboard, which I know is talking on MIDI channel 1. But again, I'm going to make it global. And this time, what we've got to do is we're looking for the actual 40. So we put in there 40. And then we've got to grab the actual number it's sending out. So obviously when you're twiddling the knob, it's going to be sending out, hey, I'm on knob number 4 and I'm sending out this value. So this is saying equivalent of 64, CC 64, and I'm sending out this value, which we're going to capture. And we're going to capture that, and we're going to assign that to our I shouldn't have called it pedal, should I? Should have called it something else. Pedal, there we go. And obviously I need to assign that a value, which is going to be the X, and these have to be 2 zeros because there's no other values to come down, so we just mark them up as 0. And look, I can't even spell today. Oh, I think it's because my keyboard's over there. I'm not used to it. So that's that bit done. So what to do now is restart Reason after I've saved this document. And in fact, what I'm going to do before I actually do restart Reason, I'm actually going to update my mapping file so I don't have to restart that as well. So this is what we're going to actually replace here. So let's see if we could probably just come in here and actually just replace this. And so this is going to be dampener pedal, and we do not have a key associated with these, so I can just take them away. And dampener pedal, cool. So that's that done. That's that done. Save this file. Let's restart Reason. Okay, so here we are. Let's have a look and see what's happening. That's our keyboard. I'm going to hit my sustain button. Hey! I did it before. I hit the stop key and I thought, oh god, it didn't work. Yay. So it's actually working. Brilliant. So I haven't sacrificed any keys now, and we can use this sustain button without any issues at all. Well, it's been a bit of a long video. I hope you kind of followed really what we're up to. So let's just pop back to our codecs files to make sure everything is as we think it is. As I said, you know, I can start building up more and more and more. I can use obviously the buttons, the faders, the knobs from my controllers, and we can obviously just start mapping it in as per normal. I think the only thing I haven't done, and which I'll very quickly demonstrate now, is I'm going to build a scope for Europa. Now, in Reason, for those who don't know, once you've got this, if we go up to File, sorry, my file's hidden, and you go to here, Export Remote Device Info, you can export all the remotes to do with the device. When you open that file up, I could open it in my little notepad editor. Here, I've got actually open here. You can see this is where it all is, and this is actually, this top line here is the information I need the most, and this is all the parameters which we can actually use. So in here now, I'm actually going to say the scope, and I'm going to put the scope in. And it's got the tab in there automatically, brilliant. So if you notice, the scope here is Propellerhead Software, whereas you're going to find, you're also going to see the word Propellerheads. Now Propellerheads is to do with more to do with all the stock stuff. So if you were dealing with say a combinator, it'd be Propellerheads combinator, whereas everything else like layers or other devices, Radical Piano, you're going to see as Propellerhead Software se.propellerheads. So I've copied that out. So that's my scope. And now what I'm going to actually do, so what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to do something, I say something silly. I'm going to do and just show you, I need to change my name Fred to a keyboard. And I'm going to put in here C2. So I'm actually going to capture C2 for the moment and say this is just for experimental purposes. And I'm going to map that out to, I need that remote map, but I think it's something like, I think there's an oscillator one on. I'm just going to save this, restart the remote maps. Now what's going to happen is when I press my C key, obviously, he says, you can see I'm actually turning this on and off. So I'm playing the keyboard, this is turning this on and off. I'm now going to hit my button, and well, I'm going to push play on the transport, so then I'm going to hit this button to stop it. Yeah, because this was my play, so when I hit this play, as you can see, it's still overriding that. But if I was to take, say, control of something else, say this combinator, so I've moved from a keyboard mode into my Reason document. So my C2 is now working on that, but if I point it at this, my C2 is mapped to that, so that's the overriding. So I was just trying to demonstrate there really the order which I was talking about earlier, that this C2 is going to override this C2, which will overwrite a C2 which is in here. We don't actually have a C2 in here, but at the same time, this is default to read all keyboards, so yeah, C2s and all these keys will be blocked when it's active. God, did you understand that little bit of verbal? I hope you did. Anyway, I think we've got everything. There's our remote maps, there's our codec files. I think we've had a lot of fun, and I think, as you can see, we could really build this up. There's nothing stopping me, I say, going across the whole of this keyboard and having different controls. And by the way, this keyboard actually comes as a wireless version, so you could actually have yourself a simple little wireless version of having all your controls mapped across these 25 keys, and obviously take it into your sound booth. You can hit record from there and set your loops up and do all kinds of things without actually being up your PC, you know. So other people where your instruments are in different places, the same as me, I've got instruments all over the place. I can take this little keyboard if I wanted to and move it around there. And I've got a large amount of control of Reason from somewhere different. Anyway, I really am burbling. Don't forget, this is in my Dropbox. I'll put a link in the description where you can go and get that from, and as well as all my codecs files. And as I say, I just use basic codec files to start with. Thank you for watching this very, very long video, and bye for now.